I won't be writing anything else.
All right, try and keep myself on time. I'd like to introduce myself earlier. My name's Ryan Worthington. My father was a Florida State Park Ranger, so I lived in two CCC parks, which is Gold Head and Olino State Park. So I did spend a lot of time in Gold Head, and I became fascinated with a lot of the existing craftsmanship that I saw daily by the CCC. In fact, I lived in a CCC house. But I want to talk a little bit today about the CCC and primarily some of the stuff they did in Clay County. The records are a little bit sketchy. They primarily worked in Camp Landing and at Gold Head. Gold Head is where you can see a lot of their efforts still today. Okay, so the birth of the CCC. I'm sure everyone's familiar with the Great Depression in October of 1929. Well, 3.5 years later, President Roosevelt gets elected, and he really was selling the New Deal, and things were pretty dire. You had, if anybody remembers, in like the 2008 housing bust, we had about 10% unemployment. It was 25% back then. About 13 million Americans were unemployed. Food, clothing, just the essentials were not a given as what we're used to today. So within, almost immediately, Congress and the president worked together. They got the Emergency Conservation Work Act passed, and I think 37 days after he was inaugurated, they had the first enrollee. They had a quota of 25,000 men that hit like that, so they expanded it. In Florida, we had about 50,000 men that were enrolled and worked, and they invested over $30 million. It started in 1933, and it terminated officially in June of 1942. World War II involvement pretty much ended it officially, as everything was transferring over to the war effort. So the CCC, it had two goals: provide employment for young men and protect the nation's natural resources. CCC was a nationwide effort. And you had to be, your family had to be on county relief or some type of relief, and you had to be between the ages of 18 and 25 and single. The pay was $30 a month, about $747 and today, and 25 of that had to go back home to your folks. It was a kind of a Army camp style setting. They did have some representatives from the Army there. So they had inspections, tents initially, and they would set up camp. They had grooming standards and the like, and they were operated under a military structure. They did have to sign contracts. They could be as little as 6 months, but you did get discharged. I think everybody pretty much enjoyed the program or was well behaved. I think it was closely to a 5% dishonorable discharge rate, which you could get here in Florida. So the CCC in Clay. One interesting company I found that did not have a lot of information, but a lot of pictures, was company 1421, and the picture on the kind of the tan colored picture on the above right has it listed as in Green Cove. Officially, they're listed in Penny Farms. I can understand there's a little bit of ambiguity because you're kind of close. Let's see, where's my later pointer? Does it work? Yes. One thing I found interesting was this picture seems to be a little bit right here newer, because this structure you can see is not there in this one. This says Green Cove. That was listed as Penny Farms, but they were here a few months and they transferred. Another company came and backfilled them, and they were planting tung trees, T-U-N-G, and I guess they're trying to get tung oil, which pretty much was replaced by synthetic oils during World War II. The trees did not deal well with cold weather, and in about 1969, I think that whole industry was done. In Clay County, they had, so like I said before, a lot of the companies, it was 1939 when Camp Landing was being worked on. They had a number of companies that came in and worked on Camp Landing. Probably the most well-known was company number 2444. They formed Camp SP5 at Goldhead Branch State Park. Now that one was a little bit unique because it had a lot of World War I veterans that were tradesmen that knew a trade, and then they worked with a couple hundred youth to train them and use them to build Goldhead. That is the camp. That's pretty much around the just south of the group camp area, where like the Boy Scout camp area in the park. And here's some folks wearing some logs.
So, Brian,
Yes.
you mind questions?
Yeah. No.
So they were kind of fashioned after military units calling themselves
Companies.
companies and,
Yeah.
and honorable, dishonorable discharges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's basically, you could see the heavily the influence of the Army in them. You know, they did have Army representatives, but they didn't. So they kind of have the structure and the order, but it wasn't a military organization, no arms or anything like that. So life in the CCC, they had a set schedule of when they got up, when they worked, and when the workday was over. They had weekends off, pending favorable inspections. If you didn't have a clean camp, there were some consequences for that. They would rotate out like KP duties, keeping the kitchen clean and everything else. They got education courses. They had camp libraries. Sports are very common, so track and field, baseball, basketball, etc. So they did have a library in camp classes, but the ones at Goldhead, they were very underutilized compared to other camps in Florida. The quality of food was actually widely known in the CCC, because I think food was scarce. I'm trying to lose weight. Back then they were trying to gain it, and they said even despite the heavy work, the average gain of enrollees, despite the manual labor, was about 12 pounds in the first 6 weeks of service. My great uncle was in the CCC, and he would tell me some few stories. I think hazing was a huge thing. Also a bit of a problem. It got the attention of the governor at the time, Governor Cohn, I believe. And they were trying to crack down on it. There was one story about, they would send them out. I don't know if anybody's in the service, you remember some of the things you got sent out. I know in the Navy was relative bearing grease, or bulkhead remover or something like that. But they'd send them out for left-handed wrenches, or striped paint for the flagpole. And one person sent him to see the captain about getting some striped paint. The captain found out about it, asked him, "Who told you this?" Found the person that was doing the hazing, and I guess sent him out into the woods each night for a whole week. It wouldn't let him come back till about 10 p.m. So I guess he learned his lesson. Michael said that the veterans would give him a hard time. He worked up north, but he said that they would tell him they were a weak generation, and a ray of sunshine would knock them over. But you can see here they got the chow lines. Those are some classes of them taking arithmetic. There's an education building, and you got your basketball and baseball. In Goldhead, if you ever go to the Yesterdays Festival where they do the cannon firings, that is the old CCC ball field, right next to the campground. I mean, not the campground, the picnic area. But yeah, it still maintains its shape. I think the park maintains it, but it's some neat history there. Camp newsletters. Now that was big. They called it Tent Town for the camp at Goldhead until they got cabins built, and then it was this pick and spade. But it had various jokes and gossip and whatnot. And I can only find one copy. Some of the other camps have a lot remaining, but it was there. You can, if you look for like the pick and spade, do a Google search, it'll bring it up. You can see completely what it is. But I like some of the old ads from around Gainesville or Palaco or Stark, and you can see safety, sports. They had some updates and everything. There's a knee-high bottling plant in Palaco. I knew about the Coca-Cola one, but I didn't know if it maybe did double duty. Okay, so if you really want to see the efforts of the CCC in like tangibles that you can enjoy, Goldhead is the place to go locally here in Clay County. They you can see a lot of the limestone work that they did on some of their cabins, but the state of Florida was very interested in building some of these state parks because you'd see increased vehicle traffic. Folks, as you know, the automobile boom was coming, and they wanted some roadside attractions were taking off. So they wanted some Florida state parks, but they were expensive. So if you have the federal government helping you build them, they did build a number of them, Gold Head being one of them. But that was a huge effort in a partnership between the federal government and the state of Florida. Yeah, you can still see a lot of them, and I'll go over some of them there. But this is them, you know, I think smoothing out the main park drive, which is paved now. It was a dirt road back then for many years, and you can kind of see more of an advertisement there. Okay, so right now Florida state parks are big on conservation. They want to keep things how they naturally are. But back then, that was not the case. They wanted it to be an attraction, something you can enjoy that would bring value to the person coming to the park. So you would see fire suppression. If you look at Gold Head now, they burn that park constantly because that is a fire-dependent habitat. In fact, it has some longleaf pines there and pine savannas that are some of the pride of Florida. If you look at a site called the Florida Natural Areas Inventory, they list Gold Head Ranch State Park as like a reference site, like ideally what like a sand hill habitat should look like. Well, back then they were trying to suppress fire, and they would have general cleanup. If you're interested in or if you know anything about you know, these like pine snags or fallen logs, they provide a value. Pine snags like the red-cockaded woodpecker will use them, or I can't remember if that's the live longleaf pines. Anyways, they do provide habitat for animals, food source for insects. They would just go in and remove a lot of it. Lagoon was dug up. You can still kind of see it today, but it is they diverted the branch, which is that I believe it's a 3rd or 4th magnitude spring that is a steep head ravine, and it runs the length of the park into Lake Johnson. Well, they diverted it and made it into like a little waterfall. Let's see, snakes. They did not want venomous snakes. They would have contests. One that I've read about, they got 13 rattlesnakes, but they would remove rattlesnakes. They would trap bobcats because they wanted deer around. They thought bobcats could be a threat. Native vegetation, they went in a ravine, anything that was not, you know, they would remove a lot of native vegetation, so it'd be nice sweeping views. And deer got accustomed to the CCC workers, and they would feed them like table scraps and tobacco. Now, when I lived at Olino, we had a deer that would come around the house, and the rangers would feed it tobacco. I think deer are quite fond of it. In fact, the superintendent of the park didn't have any cigarettes on him one day and was treated by a deer for a few hours until he could get some help. That was in a report. So that was very interesting. But those are some of the things that are big no-nos today in Florida state parks. The cabins. So there are a number of cabins, but 9 of them are original CCC built cabins. They didn't have any electricity. I believe they had running water. They did not have climate controls. Those have been since added in. I know there's some talk and some discussion about kind of restoring these cabins to what they look like, because they've been modernized a little bit in the kitchen area and stuff like that. However, that takes a lot of money and a lot of skilled labor. So the park entrance, the ranger station, when you go in, that is a CCC structure. And if you get an opportunity to go into like the camper registration area, there's a nice fireplace. It is really, really nice. Making sure I'm on time. Oh yeah, I'm on time. And so you get to see it. Now they did remove this structure right here. You can drive right up to it, but this kind of overhang right here has been removed. But yeah, right when you come to the state park, that is an original structure at Gold Head. The bathhouse, probably the most prominent one. So if you're at Lake Johnson, I know the lake levels are down, Hopefully they'll come back up, but it was a major destination. I think up until the 80s, the swimming area, when I was a kid, they, in the mid to late 80s, I remember busloads of people would come from Jacksonville. The bathhouse is a CCC structure. It has wonderful limestone steps, wood shingles. The one alteration was in the middle was a concession stand, and that was moved in the 1950s. So it was built close to the parking lots known as the rec building now. But yeah, it's one of those things that if you want to see like the main CCC structure, in my opinion, that's it. Wrong direction. Pavilions and picnic tables. So pavilion 18 and 32. So if you come into the picnic area, the first two pavilions you're going to see on your right-hand side, they're fairly large. Those were built by the CCC. Pavilion 32, I believe, still has the original cypress picnic tables made almost 90 years ago. You can tell them they're a lot thicker and hand-hewn. I don't encourage this behavior, but there's decades and decades of engravings of initials and different picnics and everything else there. They did have running water to two limestone fountains, but those have been capped. Possibly there was a water tower that was removed about 10 or 15 years ago from the CCC, and that may have played a role. I am not sure. Also closer to Pebble Lake, which is right next to Lake Johnson, you have this pavilion. It has actually a bathroom underneath, but it offers a nice sweeping view of the lake. And then some of these picnic tables, the limestone ones, there were some that were later built because, as many of you know, we used to have a naval base here in Green Cove, and you had Camp Blanding, and a lot of those service members would come to Gold Head, so they greatly expanded the picnic area. But you can still see these around today. The caretaker's residence, they did build a few of the ranger residences. I actually lived in this one as a kid. It looks exactly the same with the addition right around here. They put a back kind of porch on it. In the 80s when I lived in it, it still did not have air conditioning. It did have a fireplace, so my dad would round me up in the summer. He would cut woods, he would cut live oak, which they were trying to remove in the park because they're not naturally occurring in that habitat. And we would use it for firewood. So there was a lot of splitting, a lot of stacking. And there was a wood stove in the hallway for the rooms and the main fireplace. You can still see the chimney today. Oddly enough, when you live in those circumstances, you don't feel the heat as I do today with air conditioning. In the summer, if I've been out hiking or something, I really appreciate that air conditioning in the house. All we had there was an attic fan. And I remember when we first moved there, we got acclimated. My parents, we went to the local church, and they volunteered to host a baby shower in our house. And the folks were not used to the heat. I remember a lot of sweating and a lot of fanning as they were in there. But beautiful house. You can still see the beams that they hewed. It has been painted white. It was brown back then. But if you're going to like where the cabins are, right before you get to the hill that goes down, that's going to be on your right. It's painted white, and it's next to the service road. Okay, these are some of the removed structures that the CCC built that are there no longer. So there's two big docks on Lake Johnson. Those were removed in the 70s. Now, almost immediately, the park had to deal with declining lake levels. That cost them probably a few of the structures. They did try and make some adjustments. In the 1950s, they did a very controversial decision and built a berm between Big Lake Johnson and Little Lake Johnson as they are known today. Back then it was just one. They said they wanted to keep motorboats out, but also they diverted the ravine into Little Lake Johnson. That did not, as we know today, ultimately solve the problem. Another one was the boathouse. So they built a boathouse and they built rowboats. It was right here on the northern shore of Lake Johnson. After, I think around the 1950s, maybe 60s, it was removed. They did have a smaller pavilion, which was really cool because it was kind of thrust out on the lake a little bit. That was removed, I believe, maybe in late 80s, early 90s. Okay, the lagoon and waterfall. So this was interesting for me to find. They did take some limestone and built like a kind of a 3-tier waterfall, and the branch would come out and then just cascade down it. In the 1950s, I think it was 1953, they removed it. They said there for a few reasons, but one, it said causing mud to flow into the swimming area. So you can still see some of it's off the trail, but there is some limestone today. If they've burned recently, it's really easy accessible from where they removed it. And you can still see the earthworks in the trenches. So I'm getting close to the end, right? And so there are 7 Florida State parks built by the CCC. A few of them were that are very close. One I did not have on this list, which I'm not sure when it opened or if it, for some reason, did make the original cut, but Fort Clinch. So some CCC work did occur at Fort Clinch. It was left abandoned for a while, and they were trying to clean it up a little bit. That's probably about an hour and a half away. You have Olino, which is an hour, give or take, and then of course right here in Clay County, Gold Head Branch. Olino was a forestry camp, and you can kind of see some of the remnants of it there today. I really enjoy looking at Olino. The iconic suspension bridge, the rec halls, and all these structures are still standing, and they're quite amazing and beautiful. And I'm not going to read this, you can read it, but this is thanks to Pat who clued me in on it. There was a local named Donald Roberts Sr. who was writing to his son, Donald Roberts Jr. in October of 1935. His son was in a CCC camp, and he was giving him a little advice, like, hey, this is a good deal. In I think in the letter that I did not have in this part, but they were talking about some laborers that were working for less money, I think maybe 27, 25, and they had to spend some money for their room and board. And he was talking about what a great deal the CCC was. So, it was an important program that we can still see the benefits to here today at like say Gold Head and around the state. The CCC, that I think is amazing, almost 90 years after they really got to work in the county. And it was a great government program. And of course, once World War II picked up, it wasn't necessary anymore. There was work out there, there was, everything shifted towards the war effort. But any questions?
I have a question about the origin of the Little Johnson River. Where did that name come from? How did they name it, you know?
That's a good question. I don't know if I believe that it was named before the CCC. There are 4 lakes at Gold Head, which is Pebble, Deer, Sheeler, and Lake Johnson. The one that I think was renamed by the CCC was Deer Lake. It's originally, if you look on maps, it's called Devil's Wash Basin. Right? Very ominous sounding, but it's a sinkhole lake along the Sheeler Lake, very deep, and it hasn't suffered the same declines as say like Lake Johnson or Pebble Lake. In 2012, we had a drought, and Pebble Lake completely dried up. Like you could walk across it, it was dry, not even muddy. Lake Johnson did have the branch flowing into it, and it just kind of became like a mud hole. So I didn't even think, I thought that the branch, which is the ravine that flows into it, would keep it alive. It really didn't. But it's, since sprung back, but now there's lily pads and all kinds of vegetation that wasn't originally. One thing I do get asked if I do presentations is about Magnolia Lake State Park. That was not a CCC state park. It was, there was pressure post-World War II in the 1950s of, during the civil rights movement to allow access to African Americans to Florida state parks. And instead of doing that, they scrambled and then just built some alternative ones like Butler Beach. Little Talbot was divided. There's a number, but they built Magnolia Lake State Park by like a lease from Camp Landing in the late 50s, and it stayed. It basically stayed as a park. I wouldn't even say 10 years, but it does have like that CCC limestone look to it. And when I saw it, I said, "Oh, if that's a CCC structure," and I looked at it, it wasn't. I know Camp Landing just bulldozed a lot of once everything reverted back to Camp Landing, most of it got bulldozed, and I believe they left the limestone wall, and they may rebuild the bathhouse. I'm not sure. Yes.
So you seem to have a lot of knowledge about what's in Gold Head that is CCC. Is there signage? So is there some way for someone who didn't talk to you to know that was happening?
I know they have some brochures that'll walk you around, that have like, where you can do like a CCC tour. Some of them have plaques
That's what I was wondering.
built by the men and women of the CCC. And so right when you get to, I think, I might get it mixed up, I think it's Pavilion 32, that larger one. They do have like a plaque, and like a flagpole. I mean, when they opened up Gold Head, you think about the population of Florida at that time, I think 3,000 people showed up. You know, it was huge, and they're parking on the side of 21 and everything. It was a big deal. But yeah, you can look at. I think if you're looking at some of the structures, if you're kind of curious, that limestone that they use for the masonry, that gives it away. And some of them were, if you look at some of the beams, they've been notched a little bit. Now my father does woodworking himself. He thinks that they were milled and then given that for aesthetics. I'm not sure, but they are very, very clean for if you're using just like a broad axe and adze and those things to cut them down. I'm not aware if they had a sawmill or not. I know they had a blacksmith shop there. I know they got the limestone from Olino, and I know Olino had a sawmill and did a lot of the forestry stuff. Yes, sir.
So I remember Magnolia because it was when they were integrating parks, it was very, very tragic and disconcerting that the government built those parks and they segregated them, even though we were citizens too. And I remember they opened Magnolia because of pressure to integrate Gold Head, but they never developed Magnolia, really developed it into a reasonable state park. They had a building with a little place you could gather. There was some access to the lake, and they cleaned out some of the trees, but it basically was never developed as a state park because of that separation at that time. And then I understand they later closed it there. But I mean, it was a beautiful area, but it was never really developed. They called it Magnolia State Park, but there was really nothing there. It was just a place they carved out in the woods along the lake. They put a building there that you could go in and use and put some picnic tables, but that was it. Then until later, then I left to go in the Navy, and then they later closed Magnolia, I understand, and then everybody could go to Gold Head. And then they had Kingsley Lake, which was, I'm not sure if that was private or not, but that was segregated too, except for the side for Camp Landing. And because my special warfare unit used to go out there and to do maneuvers. But that side of the lake was the National Guard, I think, Florida National Guard on that. But the Kingsley Lake, it later integrated too, but it was segregated also. And I know people don't like to hear that, but that's part of the history.
Mm-hmm.
That's important to put everything in, perspective
Yes.
as far as what was going on.
Mhm.
Because sometimes if you don't know, and you talk about Goldhead, some people who don't know, they'll think it was open, had free access for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't. And it was just what the times were, none of us were responsible for that.
Mhm.
But history, and accurate history is very important to know.
Yes. I will say that I've looked at both of them pretty carefully. My dad was a ranger at Magnolia Lake, and you're exactly right. Well, I would argue that the lake was probably a better choice, like, because it wasn't suffering like Lake Johnson. If you look at the amenities that were offered at Magnolia Lake, there's really no comparison. You had a pavilion or two, a small bathhouse, less than half the size of a Goldhead, and I believe a dock. So it was very, it was definitely not a separate but equal situation there. And I think you can see a lot of this history in some of Florida state parks that have been passed off, right? So if you look at like Butler Beach, there'll be nice displays and everything else. You go to Little Talbot, which is still a state park, they're not talking about it. You can dig up online and look at some of those things. But yeah, there's even if you look at like Butler Beach compared to Anastasia, same situation. But it was, I believe, well, no, there's definitely some different ones there, because Butler Beach was privately owned, and they did a lot of advocacy to get some of the services there. But same thing, as you said, it was not separate but equal. It was Florida trying to, I believe, delay the inevitable. I am not speaking for for a Goldhead or any other areas that I volunteer for. But in some of the research I've done, it was kind of like a quick, all right, we don't want to integrate, so let's try and let's do this to see if we can just make the situation go away. Do you think that describes it a little bit better?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I did find out about Lake Johnson. It was named for Private George T. Johnson, also known as Johnston,
Okay.
who drowned in the lake on August 11th, 1865. Soldiers from the 3rd Illinois Cavalry Regiment who were camping nearby were enjoying a swimming escapade, if you will. And they say it was a hot August day, and he accidentally drowned. So they named it for him.
Oh, that is good. I did not know that. So that's some great information. Yes, ma'am.
And I had the opportunity to go to a few of those lakes where you were talking about. He was talking about Magnolia, it's coming up, Talon Island, the beaches. I had the pleasure of going to all three of those. Okay, at the time, for American Beach, there used to be a lady called the Beach Lady.
Ah, yes.
You remember? The Beach Lady. Beach Lady's dead and all that, but I had a chance to walk those beaches before.
Wow.
Yeah.
The beach lady was very special. I think she had a nice inheritance
Yeah.
that she selflessly donated
Yeah.
to various organizations that were all about conservation. Yes, ma'am.
And a lot of people don't know that she was related to Kingsley.
No kidding.
That is right,
Anna
like a
Jolly?
great granddaughter or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, Zephaniah
So
Kingsley.
she was related to A.L. Lewis.
Right.
A.L. Lewis, who was their father, he owned a large insurance company called Independent Life,
Mhm.
which was one of the tallest buildings, was Afro-American. And they were one of the tallest buildings in Jack, it still stands today. And the beach lady's sister is Dr. Bennett, who now owns that property, which they call American Beach.
Oh, that's American Beach.
Yeah, American Beach, and then,